Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Williams from Holly Hill PD in Florida. He has over 26 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Williams. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Paige. Good to be here.
Of course, I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation. I know that there's a lot that you're doing right now in the wellness space organizationally, but I would really like to give a little bit of background for anyone who's listening who doesn't know who you are. Give us a little bit of insight. Who are you as a person, as a leader? What has your career looked like so far?
Well, I am originally we're in Florida now, but I'm originally from the North Panhandle of Florida, where I got in law enforcement because my family has all been first responders. So I grew up around first responders. I've done 26 years now total in law enforcement. I retired recently, last year, June of last year, from Daytona Beach Police Department, where I did 25 years there, leaving out as the captain of Criminal Investigations Division. And then I took 2 weeks off vacation. Then I was appointed here next door at the Holly Hill Police Department as the chief of police. My history in law enforcement has been very, I would say, exciting. I've been very diverse in a lot of different aspects of law enforcement, from management leadership to crime enforcement, proactive crime analysis, and things of that nature. So I have a lot of knowledge in different areas of law enforcement. And when I was promoted here, obviously I came in with a lot of managerial knowledge and leadership knowledge experience to come in to turn the agency in a new direction. And obviously with that we have a lot of problems and we had a lot of issues, hills to climb, learning curves to get over. But we've managed to kind of put everything kind of in order like we want them to go, the direction that we're trying to go to right now. Um, I love law enforcement. My family, like I said, has been part of first responders. I have a very supportive family, wife and two kids that are very supportive in my current assignment. And a lot of people don't know that it takes a toll on families. We don't talk much about the families that law enforcement officers leave behind when they come into work and going home, and trying to keep that balance sometimes is a lot. So, but it's been good. This is a great career, and I'm enjoying every moment of it.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. There are a few things I want to dissect in that, but the first thing is based on your leadership experience. What do you think is the most important leadership lesson that you've learned throughout your career?
It's the old adage, lead by example.
Mm.
I brought that with me from Daytona Beach Police Department, from my coming up through management and supervisory level positions. I have to be the example that I want other people to follow. And that's something that I've seen have taken me a lot of places, have gotten a lot of buy-in from a lot of officers and employees. Is if I can do it, if they can see me doing it, then they're going to be more willing to want to follow that. Once they understand and see that I am doing it and understand why we're doing it, I get a lot more buy-in and a lot more positive feedback that way. So I think that's been like the main thing, is just to be the example.
Yeah, I actually really like that. And, I'm sure everyone who's listening can relate to this example. It's such a simple example, but I remember in one of my relationships where I was like, I think you should do this and you should do that and you should take care of yourself and you should. And they were like so defensive, they were
Hmm.
like, why are you telling me what to do? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do the things that I want to see in, the people around me. So I'm going to set that example and I'm going to take care of myself in this way. And I'm going to do, and I don't think that it was in that moment, like I'm going to influence them to also be this way, but it was like,
Hmm.
okay, well, if you're not going to do it, then like I'm not going to worry about you. I'm just going to worry about me and I'm going to do my thing. And by doing my thing, by being like, this is the person I want to be,
Hmm.
they saw that and they saw the improvements and then they were like, I want to be like that too. Wait,
Hmm. Exactly.
and
Exactly.
so I do think that a lot of times we point our fingers at everybody else, being like, I think you should do all these things. And if we instead take that attention inward and say, I'm going to do these things, I'm going to raise my own bar, I'm going to lead by example, then other people do want to follow that without you really having to force their hand.
Absolutely. I was in a position a couple months ago and I had to eat my own words. We may talk about this a little later on in the broadcast here, but uh, when I was actually promoting or swearing in a couple officers, one of my statements to them was to, make sure you keep yourself healthy, stay active and things of that nature. And actually, my wife was the one that brought it to my attention afterwards. She's like, you're telling them to do that, and you need to do better yourself with that. And I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely right. I've stressed myself out. I'm running left and right because I'm still here trying to put this agency together. And I'm like, I'm not taking any time for myself. So how can I tell the officers, to stay healthy, stay active, and as a police chief, I'm not doing that either. So I had to make sure I get back in the gym, I get more active and things of that nature to be that example that I've always, grounded myself on. So,
100%. Yeah, and I think people can kind of sniff it out too. Like, I've had the same experience within this space, even as of recently, like I work 15-hour days. I don't have weekends. I don't know what that looks like, and there was a period of time where I also wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't,
Mhm.
doing the things that we talk about on this podcast all the time. We're talking about wellness and how important it is. And there was that moment where I kind of like woke up and I snapped out of it a little bit and I was like, oh my gosh, like if I'm going to talk about these things, if I'm going to encourage other people to prioritize themselves, I have to also be doing that because people can
Absolutely.
sniff out if it's unauthentic, if
Mhm.
someone's talking the talk but not walking the walk, and so I think that we have to give ourselves grace because I don't think that life is going to be balanced. I think that true balance is a fallacy. I think that there's always going to be a certain of unlevelness, right? Like
Absolutely.
sometimes work is going to take more out of you, and sometimes you're going to, have the opposite where work feels a little bit more chill and you have opportunities to prioritize other
Mhm.
things. And so there's always going to be a little bit of imbalance, but I think that we have to notice those times of imbalance and then we have to try to balance it out as much as we can, even though it's not going to be perfect. And we have to find the space and the time. And I'm so glad that you had someone who's in your corner that wants you to
Yeah.
win, that kind of calls you out a little bit. Sometimes that's what it takes is for
Yeah.
someone like your
Absolutely.
wife to be like, hey, listen, like I love you, but like you got to do this too. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about because you said that this career can take a toll on your family. What is the secret to keeping a strong and successful marriage and relationship through the stressors of this career?
I think realizing the vulnerabilities that can present themselves in your marriage. Like you said, this job can take so much from you. Like you said, I'm spending 15, 16, 17 hours a day at work. And then when I get home, I'm exhausted. I don't have time for the wife. I don't have time for the kids. That can become a norm. And
Mm.
when you don't realize that. And what I try to make sure I do is, make time in my schedule, try to turn things off. Even this past weekend, Thanksgiving Day, I tried to make it a point that I was not going to look at emails, look at anything of that nature. I even told my assistant that I'm not doing anything, but yet I found myself twice during that day checking emails, sending emails out, focusing on this week's agenda items and getting things prepared. So I'm trying to be better at that, making sure I kind of monitor that, and when I do find myself getting too far on this side, I try to bring myself back closer to the middle. And you also got to have a very supportive family support system at home. My wife really understands the job title. She understands what comes with the job itself. And she's been riding with me from day one. So over 26 years, she understands the law enforcement culture. My kids, my son he's in line next to become a police officer next year. So it's just ingrained in our family. So we kind of understand that culture and we know how to accept it. But at the same time, I have to be responsive to, their needs when the time comes. I have to be able to turn law enforcement off and turn off home life. for my family. If that means, making a date night every week or making sure we have family time with the kids during the weekday, helping them with the homework. I make sure I make myself available for these different items. Even today, once I'm leaving here early so I can go spend time with my son and my daughter, that we're going to be putting up Christmas lights. So I have to make time for things like that. And I think that's kind of like where success comes in at.
Yeah, I like that you said like scheduling the time. For me, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen. And so I've gotten really used to scheduling personal time,
Yes.
scheduling the date night, scheduling, whatever it is that you need to do, even if it seems silly, like putting on the calendar, we're hanging Christmas lights tonight. Like this is
Mhm.
this is happening.
Yeah.
I have found a lot of success with that because otherwise my calendar gets full with other stuff. And so
Hmm.
blocking out the time, I also have to tell my assistant, like, we are not scheduling stuff here. This is time for XYZ. And so someone told me, and this stuck with me, and I've mentioned this a couple times on this podcast, but they said wellness is about boundaries. And I really liked that because I think that when you are so busy, there's always more to do. That's the thing. Like it's never ending, right? There's always
Absolutely.
more to do. But there has to be those times of saying no or like recognizing, okay, and this has helped me too, of like, what absolutely has to happen right this second? Is this like urgent top
Hmm.
priority that like if we do not get this done, the whole ship is sinking?
Yep.
Or is it, hey, this can be done tomorrow? And I think that I used to live in this space of like everything was urgent and it had to be done right now or else. And that was a detriment to the time that I needed to spend with friends,
Hmm.
family, or with myself. And when I was able to take a look at the tasks at hand and say, okay, maybe there's one or two things that are absolutely urgent and absolutely need to be taken care of right now. And then everything else, there's like kind of a system of like importance all the way down to like not really important at all. And I think if we can identify that in our schedule, then it helps to free up that space because when you are so passionate about what you do, you want to do it all the time.
Hmm.
But some of it can be pushed till tomorrow. And I also worked on Thanksgiving. I did the same thing that you did. But what I tried to do is say, okay, I'm going to get up really early because I know everyone. I was spending time with my family. And I was like, I know they're not going to wake up until like
Yeah.
7 or 8. So I'm
Yep.
going to get up at 5 and I'm going to make sure I'm ready. I'm ready to go. So I'm dressed, I'm all the things. And then I'm going to, get my coffee and I'm going to work for like an hour or two before anyone wakes up. And then of course, like they all woke up and I was still working. But there's ways to make the
Yeah, it
space.
is ways. It is ways. When I
Yeah,
was getting my master's degree, and I was doing it while I was still working. And obviously, when you're in management, you're working more than 40 hours a week, and trying to get a master's degree is almost like, I won't say impossible, but very hard to do.
sure.
So what I would do to maintain my balance in my family life, and I did this with an interview I did with one of my universities, is I would come home and spend time with the kids, make sure they get to bed, make sure the homework done, and then we all would go to bed. Uh, I would probably get 4 hours of sleep. I would probably wake up like 2 in the morning, and that's when I would get my schoolwork done up until 6 a.m. And then I would get ready to go to work. But that was my life for 18 months on my master's degree program. But I made sure I still maintain that balance of family home life as well in doing
Yeah.
that. So I definitely understand what you're saying when you're trying to prioritize in that manner.
Well, and I'm never going to tell people like get 4 hours of sleep. However, I
No.
do think that short-term discomfort for long-term gain, right? You knew that you were gonna be able to get to the other end of that in 8 months. You
Oh,
knew
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And so short-term discomfort for long-term gain. Now you have a master's and
Hmm.
that's a sense of accomplishment. And I think that learning and growing in education is a part of wellness. And so again, I think it goes back to what we said before. It's never going to be balanced,
Yeah.
and during that time, there was a big imbalance because
Hmm.
you were so busy and trying to accomplish all these things. But then once you accomplish that, it levels out a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so you came into this new agency, your existing agency, as an outside chief coming in. And you had mentioned, kind of in your intro that you walked into maybe some like challenges within the organization. I know you and I talked offline about maybe morale being low and walking into a completely different culture than what you were used to at your previous agency. Can you walk us through that? What was it like coming into a new agency? What were some of the challenges that you saw? And what are some of the things that you're trying to do to boost morale and to build a stronger culture?
Well, obviously, when I was going through the chief's promotional appointment process, I kind of knew what was already happening at within the organization. So I started doing a lot more of my research beforehand, as any prospective chief would do. Mhm. So I understood the need that was going to be needed there, what's required there. I understood the challenges, not only from internal, but also external with the community. There was a strong lack of distrust of the police department. Um, so I knew immediately what I had to do coming in was um, gain acceptance and buy-in from my officers, employees, and staff, and also at the same time, begin to work on our community as far as gaining their trust back. So I immediately, my first 30 days, I put a 30, 60, 90-day plan together. And my first 30 days were basically surrounding meeting with elected officials, meeting with all staff, and starting to meet with some of the business leaders within the community. And what that was going to do was basically kind of getting some consistency and gaining a lot of trust within the agency and the city itself. They needed some stability, and that's what I was trying to bring. And by starting this process, they were immediately going to see something different than previous administrations at this police department. Uh, and coming from the outside, you got a total different view of things, also how things can be done. The majority of the police chiefs here were internal, so they never really had that outside view before. So focusing on the trust, focusing on the stability was my main thing. Establishing my three pillars of transparency, accountability, um, and trust itself is what I was trying to build and started maintaining within the agency. And from there, I started what I call low-hanging fruit. Um, you find out what the officers and the staff needs, what they want. So things that I could accomplish very immediately, that's what I did it very, very quickly. Within a month, I had a drone program reestablished here. I had a lot of different operations and networks starting to gather. Within a month itself, I was moving very fast and very quickly. Um, so these were some of the criteria that I was looking at trying to establish. I needed to get this gain the support of the officers. I wasn't going to be able to do anything else here unless I gained the support of all the staff members here and officers. Once they believed that I was coming in with fresh ideas, a fresh view, a fresh look, then they start getting on the same page, getting the buy-in that I needed to start getting things done. A chief can't do this by themselves. The chief is going to need the support of staff and officers to fulfill the mission and the goals that they want to get done here in any type of agency. And that's what I begin to do. I begin to meet with the business owners, so they can understand who I am, what I stand for, and what they expect from me. And believe it or not, I started getting so much support from the community. Um, it was really hard for me to feel like I was an outsider
Mm.
because I had a tremendous amount of support, not only from my elected officials, but especially from the community. They came with arms open, and whatever I needed, they provided. Obviously, coming from a large agency to a small agency, your financial expectations shrinks dramatically. And so I had to work with less, but trying to accomplish more. And that's where the community support came in at. And they have been tremendous up to this point. That's making sure the police department is provided for and the things that we need to and get things done. So that's kind of like how I started my whole leadership career here. And we just been improving on things as we go. Um, from things, training standpoints, a lot of the deficiencies that I saw in the agency when I first started here, I saw it all came back to training. So I had to make sure that was one of my first priorities is get reestablishing a training unit. and making sure the proper training to bring in wellness and wellness policies was going to be up to date and on point when I brought them in. So that's kind of some of the things that I brought up and kind of got started so far.
I like that you said that a chief can't do it alone because it really establishes that team mentality.
Hmm.
And I don't know why when you were talking, I was really thinking of kind of like a sports team, right? You can
Hmm.
think of like any one of your favorite sports team, but you have the coach, right? And the coach is like the best, they could be the best coach ever. But if there isn't that support with the team and the team's not responding to what the coach is saying, the team's going to
Hmm.
fall apart, right? You have to
Absolutely.
work together. And then when you expand out from there, the fans, I'm going to relate the fans to like the community, right? If you have, I mean, look at it anytime like you play an away game, you can see the decline in performance with a lot of the teams that are coming from the another state, right? Because
Absolutely.
they don't have the support of the community or the fans, right? So you start to see like that's why it's like home field advantage, right? So like when you have the community and the fans that are supportive and they're cheering you on and they're there with you, it boosts your performance, right? And so that's what I was thinking of is like when you were talking is, you know, you're the coach, like you're an integral part of like how you're leading this team, but you have to have the support of the team and the community to be successful and to win games, right? Or to
Absolutely.
have successes out on the field. I like that you talked about creating a foundation first and
Hmm.
a foundation of transparency, accountability, trust, and then going for easy wins. You know, when you said like low hanging fruit, that's what I thought of is like, how can we have like quick, easy wins
Hmm.
to like create that momentum? Because we know like the things at the top of the tree are going to take longer, right? There's
Yeah.
going to be a delay in action because maybe there's, you know, some other things that you have to do in
Yeah.
advance to get there.
Absolutely.
So like going for the easy wins to create that momentum and to start like, you know, hitting the ground running.
Absolutely. You know, and it's still always going to be a work in progress. Like we just said earlier, there's always going to be something more to do. And when I met with all my staff, I met with them individually and for like 30 minutes to an hour each. And during that time, I made sure I laid out my plan of what my expectations were of them, but also, you know, what I wanted to bring here to the agency. And the last thing I followed up with each one of them is that Rome was not built in a day.
Mm,
And I made sure I explained what that meant is a lot of things that has happened is going to take time to change in a lot of ways. Things that you want to hear, equipment that we need is going to take time because some things I have financial restraints on me that is going to take a little bit more time to get done. And they understood that and they starting to see what I mean because a lot of things now that I said I wanted to do, they're starting to come to pass. They're starting to come into play now. We're finally getting our accreditation status back in line and things like that that took over a year to get started, but they see that there's progress. And
mhm.
long as you continue in progress, you know, I believe that your staff and your organization is going to continue to stand behind you. Once everything becomes stagnant, that's when you may have a lot of questions and concerns from people.
Well, I think that speaks to the importance and the power of communication and
Mhm.
explaining the why. You know, I think
Yes.
that a lot of times,
Yes.
like, we just all want to know why. You know,
Hmm.
why are these decisions being made in that way? Why are things taking so long? You know, why aren't we seeing this or why are we seeing that? And having that open line of communication to say, hey, like, these are the things that we're doing. And here's why it's taking so long. You know, I'm restricted by our budget right now, or, you know,
Hmm.
whatever it is that constraint is. And I always, it's kind of this a similar concept, but I always say it's like the Titanic. You know, it's a slower moving ship and it's
Yep.
harder to turn. So things are gonna, you know, it's gonna turn slowly. It's not a jet ski. Although
Yep. Exactly.
maybe we wish it was, you know, sometimes that we could just whip 180 really quick, you know, and we're on our way. You know, it's a slower moving turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think
Absolutely.
having those conversations, you know, and communicating and explaining the why helps a lot.
Hmm. And that's one of the reasons I created what we call an officer readiness team. And what that is I meet with an officer from every shift and for every position or department within the agency. And we meet once a month And what we do, we sit down, they get the chance to sit down with me and talk to me. Whatever ideas they may have, whatever complaints they may have, they bring it to that meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is like what you just said earlier, communication,
Mhm.
being able to communicate everything directly to the staff members themselves, and they take that information back to their squads, back to their platoons. And I also have a meeting with the supervisors quarterly, which I have the same thing, the information they take back to their squads and their platoons, because the communication is key to everything. Paige, and you understand that as well. It is critical to the survival of an organization. You have to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and I think too, when you have those moments of, hey, tell me the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, I'm open to hearing it and figuring out what we can do to work together to make things as best as possible. Maybe I can't do everything, but at least I'm
Mhm.
willing to hear you. I think that also creates value on the other side. A lot of times people just want to feel like they are valued and their opinions are valued and the things that they're seeing are being heard. And so
Absolutely.
having those moments of communication, but also creating that value in each person and saying like, hey, like how you see things is important to me. I
Absolutely.
value you as a person. So I like that. I think that that's really cool. And, obviously, if it's a larger organization, maybe it's a little bit harder to get in front of everyone every month, but
Mhm.
I would imagine it's still doable to a certain
Yeah.
extent. Maybe it's every other month that you can get to everyone but I think that every organization can do something like that to have those those open lines of communication.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, because I think we can look at two sides of the coin. How do you think that culture impacts wellness and performance, whether it's in a good way or a bad way? So, how does a bad culture or a broken culture impact wellness and performance? And how does a positive culture impact performance and wellness?
Well, talking from experience, a bad culture, how does that impact it? It impacts it tremendously. When you do not employ a lot of the positive forces of being of healthiness and wellness with an officer, it goes into your training policies and things of that nature, or lack thereof.
Mm.
And when you don't have those policies or training criteria in place, your wellness policy, your wellness atmosphere or attitude is going to diminish tremendously. Not only that, but when you don't have the leadership that is enforcing or standing behind wellness policies and things of that nature, it's going to be a negative effect. Not only is it going to affect the training, it's going to not only is going to affect injuries, possibly injuries to officers, recovery, longevity within the agency, and all these different things like that. It brings a host of problems when you do not incorporate a positive atmosphere when you're dealing surrounding wellness itself. Now, when it comes to positive wellness, one thing that I've incorporated now, I started off with a more stringent policy, more focused policy when it comes to wellness. This gives the organization and the mindset that leadership is behind you. Leadership supports this. Leadership wants this. And with them seeing policies being put in place, with them seeing uh, different types of trainings put in place to follow up or focus on wellness, they start believing that the cultures can start changing. Officers and employees start believing in what the leadership is trying to do. We've incorporated not only policy, but we had a what we call an EAP program through our primary healthcare system, and I got to see it on display early on in my leadership here. I was not impressed with it. It was not a very focused. It was not a very well thought out EAP process. So I immediately began to look at outside resources, private organizations that was willing to come in locally. I want to continue to keep that in the community, that would be willing to come in and substitute or fill in those gaps for us. And that's what we've started. We got several private organizations that have come in now on our staff. So now they actually come in and help us with a lot of the different trainings, a lot of the different support that we need to basically incorporate and build our wellness program here. And
Mhm.
that's all about creating that positive, like you said, that positive nature, positive atmosphere. And it has to start on top. And that's what I started to do.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost like reverse engineering a little bit when you can take a look and say, because one of the things that we're going to hear, and of course, there's going to be constraints on budget all the time,
Mhm.
and every year it seems like things are getting cut more and more and
Yes.
more. And the first thing to go is training and wellness, usually,
Hmm.
right? And when you hear this, like, well, we don't have the money for this, when we can have these conversations and say, okay, well, what happens if we don't have that? If you don't focus on wellness,
Yes,
we have more injuries, which are going to cost us a lot more than maybe focusing on it in the first place.
exactly.
If we don't have this, you talked about having more longevity. Maybe people are leaving, they're getting burnt out, the morale's
Hmm.
not good or whatever, and they're leaving, or there's mental health claims. That's going to cost a lot more than establishing wellness as a
Yep,
part of the
absolutely.
foundation. We also talk about, different things that I think maybe aren't as tangible, but how is the employee interacting with the community? What
Hmm.
types of decisions are they making? Are these effective decisions? Are they poor decisions? And how does that impact the organization? And so when we talk about ROI, return on investment, having the proactive measures is going to pay long term than waiting to have the reactive measures. The reactive measures are going to be, all of the injuries that happen as a result to not focusing on it, all the use of force or whatever it is that maybe didn't need to happen in the first place. That's going to be the reactive. And a lot of times proactive is less expensive than reactive, but you have to kind of
Absolutely.
like work yourself backwards on that. So I love that you are focusing on more of a proactive approach. How can you establish a foundation that supports a positive culture and wellness? What are some of the things that are maybe in the future? What are some of the things that you are wanting to implement or that you are looking at implementing to really build out the program? Or is there anything kind of on the horizon?
We are still sort of working with our private organizations
Mhm.
to build more training projects within the agency itself. I would like to try to look at some type of financial component,
Mhm.
but I know that's going to be definitely years down the line. We have to kind of work that out with our elected officials and whatnot.
Yeah.
But also, we did create like I told you, the officer readiness committee, but we also still do what we call a officer of the quarter.
Mm.
And that's to focus on, giving it's a recognition program and it's designed to just give them credit where credit is due. It helps them boost morale. It helps them build up their confidence, knowing that they have a purpose and that we recognize as their purpose when they come and doing the job. Sometimes if you don't recognize officers, they don't feel that they're recognized. They don't feel that they're important. They don't feel like what they do matters. You're going to see job activity drop. You're going to see the morale of that officer go down and things of that nature. So we try to incorporate a couple things, but there's still a lot more to do. But we're still working with the outside agencies to try to bring in new ideas.
Yeah, I think that's actually really smart, and I'm so glad that you said that you guys are doing that. I I actually had someone call me out on this recently. It's like that story you told about your wife, when she kind of called you out and you're like, "Wait, you're
Yeah.
right." I was like, "Yeah, like we gotta, recognize all the room for growth." And there was a chief that was like, "Yes, I agree, but also like how can you give yourself recognition for the successes?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. Like I'm really bad at that. I'm really hard
Mhm.
on myself. I always am looking for ways to improve instead of sometimes, and I think you should do that. I think that that helps you to grow, if you're always trying to improve yourself and you don't have that stagnation that you mentioned before. But how can we also recognize when we do things really well? And we sometimes never hear that. Like I think we need to do it within ourselves. It's our responsibility to do that for us, but it feels good when someone else outside of you tells you that you're doing a good job or
Yep.
thanks you for something that you did. It feels good, especially when
Mhm.
you're like in the grind and you're working so hard and we know that you guys are working so hard. And so
Mhm.
if you are only hearing the room for improvement. If you are only hearing when you mess up or how you could do better next time, and you never ever hear the stuff that you're doing well, I think that does take a toll on you.
Yeah,
And
it
so
does.
having, systems in place that not only recognize good behavior, but also reward good behavior.
Hmm.
And I also think, and I don't know if you know this or if this was intentional, but having like kind of like a leaderboard, I think it also gives a little bit of competitiveness to like having that good behavior because if I see someone that's like the employee of the month and like they're recognized, I'm like, I want to be that. Like I
Hmm.
want to be there, and that's going to encourage more of that good behavior.
And believe it or not, it's funny you say that because that's one of the suggestions that came up in our officer readiness meeting is to make it competitive every month on the shifts. So who's doing what stat wise and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So there, I'm always being transparent. I have that open door policy to say, guys, listen, girls, listen, I don't have all the answers. So I encourage you to bring me some suggestions. I will promise I will listen to everything you bring me. And some stuff I may not be able to use, and I will let you know why. And some stuff I will be able to use, and I will make sure you get the credit for that as well. Um, but it's funny you say that because that's one of the things they brought up as well.
Yeah, I say all the time, like the best things that I've done throughout my career have not been my idea. They've been
Hmm.
other people's ideas. And I've just been the one who can implement those things.
Yep,
So I think
absolutely.
when you can come from that of like, I don't know everything and I don't want to, and I want to make this about you guys. So what are you looking for? What do you think would make it the best? Then that's the best case scenario because now everyone's
Absolutely.
like, wow, like Chief built this for me. Like Chief actually took my suggestion and now we're all competing to be, the best person this month, and it's super fun. And so I like that a lot. My final question for you is for the younger person, someone who's earlier in their career. What words of wisdom would you share with them? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier in your career or something that's helped you along the way.
Oh, it's a lot of things, Paige, that I can probably say. I would say this. Wow. Uh, you don't have to be perfect. Just be purposeful. Nobody expects you to have it all figured out. But just be intentional about who you are and what you're trying to do and who you're trying to become.
I love that. You don't have to
Yeah.
be perfect, just be purposeful.
Yeah,
Those are great
I
words
would
of
say that.
wisdom. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing some of the things that you're working on organizationally and your experience in this space. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Of course.